Who would win a long-awaited confrontation between two striking titans? Adesanya versus Pereira, an anticipated MMA fight. Adesanya, the UFC middleweight champion, had 2 kickboxing knockout losses against Pereira. Will he seek atonement against him? These elite fighters will give you a fantastic Octagon bout. Can Adesanya avenge his defeats and consolidate his domination? Or will Pereira continue his rule over his bitter rival? Prepare for a UFC history-making showdown of ability, technique, and power. Who will win this exciting fight? The Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC, is home to athletes who are driven by the desire to compete against a triumph over their opponents. Even in competitions that do not involve direct physical conflict, rivalries can develop because of their innate desire to outperform one's opponents. This feeling is amplified when the victorious contestant is tasked with inflicting bodily injury on the loser in order to validate their triumph. The rivalry between Adesanya and Pereira is one of the most compelling narratives in the annals of combat sport. The main event of UFC 287 will feature a rematch between the 2 middleweight competitors for the 4th time in their respective careers. In preparation for their next kickboxing match, we decided to look back on their careers to see who had the superior overall record. Both Adesanya and Pereira have now competed against one another 3 times. 3 times in kickboxing and 1 time in mixed martial arts. The Brazilian competitor has prevailed each and every time. Fans, however, are standing up because of the competitive character of the battles, which is taking place in the 4th round. As a result, you shouldn't be surprised to see yet another spectacular performance from both Pereira and Adesanya at UFC 287. The Adesanya-Pereira rivalry is distinct from the other known conflicts in the UFC in a number of respects, despite the fact that the number of noted conflicts in the UFC is highly relative. Their time spent competing against one another in kickboxing served as a seed that grew into this animosity. There is hardly no other rivalry in the organization that began in a different sport under the auspices of a different promotion that has continued all the way up to the UFC. This desired rivalry between the past king of UFC middleweight division and the current champion of the UFC middleweight division began in the year of 2016 at the prominent worldwide kickboxing promotion known as Glory Kickboxing. Israel Adesanya against Alex Pereira. Number 1. The nightmare-like fight that Israel Adesanya had to endure against Alex Poatan Pereira began at the event called Glory of Heroes, which was staged in China. The last stylebender got the fight off to a strong start and outstruck his longtime adversary, Pereira. In earlier rounds, he was successful in landing numerous key shots. However, only a few minutes after the match began, Pereira started incorporating his combinations into the action as well. Pereira also connected with a number of combinations, which added an additional layer of intrigue to the fight. In addition, both competitors showed signs of slowing down in the later stages of the competition, but neither of them was able to make the most of the opportunity presented to them. At the end of the day, the judges came to the conclusion that the results should be declared in favor of the Brazilian. Israel Adesanya against Alex Pereira, number 2. Following his victory over Adesanya, Pereira went on a winning streak that culminated in him capturing the Glory Kickboxing Middleweight Championship. However, this also increased the likelihood of there being a rematch in the future. While everything was going on, Adesanya was climbing the ranks and eventually became the number 1 contender for the Glory Kickboxing Middleweight Championship. The much anticipated rematch between the 2 fighters has finally been set for March 2017 and is on the calendar. The moment had finally come for the last stylebender to get revenge on Poatan for the dubious defeat they had suffered at each other's hands. However, Adesanya found out that the truth was much worse than he anticipated. Despite having a solid start to the fight and forcing Pereira into the corner a few times, Izzy was sent crashing to the ground by Pereira's powerful left hook in the final round of the fight. This resulted in Pereira winning the fight. After suffering the defeat, Adesanya made the following statement. It's a lovely narrative for him. In his garden, after I was already 2 rounds behind, he came out in the 3rd round and knocked me out. Izzy's career in combat sport was just getting started at that point, and this was the first time he had ever been knocked out. Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira, number 3, at UFC 281. The second loss that Izzy suffered at the hands of Pereira was the one that put an end to his kickboxing career. The athlete then made the switch to mixed martial arts, MMA, and in 2018, he was signed by the UFC. He defeated practically every UFC middleweight that was on the roster in order to win the UFC middleweight championship and add it to his name. In 2021, however, Adesanya's bitter adversary also joined the Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC. It was beneficial for the UFC as it resulted in the addition of another worthy competitor in the middleweight class. After Pereira entered the UFC, he went on to win 3 consecutive fights, which earned him the opportunity to challenge his longtime adversary Israel Adesanya for the UFC middleweight championship. Because of this, the two were supposed to compete against one another in the main event of UFC 281 on November 13th, 2022, with the gold medal in the middleweight division on the line. Even at the beginning of this match, Adesanya showed a lot of promise. After landing a powerful straight right and following it up with a left hook at the end of the first round that wobbled Poatan, he had also come awfully closer to fulfilling his unmet desire of defeating Poatan. However, the bell that signified the conclusion of the round came just at that moment, saving Pereira from certain defeat. In contrast, the Brazilian did not begin to demonstrate his abilities until the middle rounds of the fight. In the final round, he earned a standing knockout victory against the reigning middleweight champion of the UFC, which put an end to Pereira's hopes of overcoming him. With this victory, Poatan was also able to take Izzy's UFC middleweight championship. Israel Adesanya may not have another opportunity to avenge his previous defeats after UFC 287. Izzy has claimed that he does not believe in giving up, despite the fact that they had lost 3 times to Pereira. He also admitted that he intended to continue their battle until he prevailed against Pereira. As a result of Adesanya's performance at UFC 281, the UFC administration is now confident that he should have a rematch. As a result, the last stylebender was given yet another opportunity to regain his lost UFC middleweight title and revenge his losses against Poatan at the UFC 287 event, which is slated to take place on April 8th, 2023. There are a lot of people who think that Adesanya has nothing to lose at this point in time. Pereira had stripped him of a great deal, including his reputation in the UFC, and he was left with little. It could cause Izzy to become carefree and deliver a performance that will be remembered for the rest of his life. On the other hand, it is clear that his supporters are eager to see him go around with the UFC middleweight championship around his waist. What about the cage though? A kickboxing match with 4-ounce gloves seems likely unless Adesanya, in a hilarious move, decides to drop and go for a takedown. With those gloves on, Pereira will be much more dangerous to take a shot from, but the cage will definitely work in Adesanya's favor this time. Kickboxing bouts take place in a ring, which necessarily has 4 walls. As a boxer, Adesanya values his personal space. He prefers fighting inside a cage rather than in a ring, so that he may use his lateral footwork to outmaneuver his opponents. A ring's confinement is more severe because of its diminutive size and sharp corners. Kickboxers, on the other hand, can't just duck and weave as boxers can because of all the leg and body kicks they'll take. Adesanya's success in mixed martial arts stems in large part from the fact that he has had to be considerably more conservative with his mobility than he was in kickboxing. Adesanya can use all the dodging and jumping around he wants to in mixed martial arts. There aren't any tight nooks for him to get stuck in, and he has a lot more room in the cage. Previous fights were close, but Alex Pereira prevailed because of his home field advantage. A power puncher will always have the upper hand in a confined area with tight corners. If you like this video, you might consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss any future uploads.